Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita with Future Pastimes, and I'm a designer on the expansions for the Classic Dune board game 2019 edition from Gale Force 9. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the faction advantages, both for basic and advanced, from the original 1979 edition for those base 6 factions, and then just talk a little bit about how they are different at all from what you have in the Gale Force 9 edition of Dune. So we're going to go through the player shields, which had your faction advantage information written right on there, nothing on the backs. But that was for the basic. Your advanced faction advantages, or what were called the optional advantages, are on the back of the player aid, except for Bene Gesserit, but we'll get to that. So let's go through all of the basic faction advantages, and then we'll discuss the optional advanced ones later. So we're going to start with the Atreides here, and all the setups are the same, so there was no deviation there, and the free revival is the same as well. So we'll just go into the advantages. It says during the bidding round, which is now the phase, you may look at each treachery card as it comes up for purchase before any player bids on it. So that's basically the same. At the start of the movement round, you may look at the top card of the spice deck. That is the same as well. And during the battle round, you may force your opponent to show you your choice of one of the 4 elements they will use in their battle plan against you: the leader, the weapon, the defense, or the number dialed. If your opponent shows you that they're not playing a weapon or defense, you may not ask to see another element of their plan. So that's the same, and again, it's not using the notion of slots. Like if I'm playing a worthless card in place of a weapon, I don't show them the worthless card. I just say, I'm not playing a weapon. And then the alliance thing, you may assist your allies by forcing their opponents to show you them one element of their battle plan. So that is the same as well. So really no difference for the Atreides in terms of their basic advantages. Next we get the Bene Gesserit here, or Reverend Mother Mohayim. At the start of the game, before traders are picked, you write down the name of one other player and the turn in which you think they will win. You cannot predict the automatic wins for the Guild of the Fremen. If that player wins alone or as an ally, even your own ally, when you have predicted, you reveal the prediction and you alone have won. And you can win normally, of course. So that's the same, except you're using the prediction cards, which makes it a little bit easier. There's no writing stuff down, which is very 20th century. Whenever any other player ships tokens onto Dune from off-planet, you may ship 1 token from your reserves, and then it puts in parentheses, spiritual advisors, into the polar sink. You may also ship normally, of course. So that's essentially the same as well. And then you may voice your opponents to do as you wish with respect to one of the cards they'll play in their battle plan, to play or not play a projectile, shield, poison, snooper, laze gun, or worthless card. You cannot voice a cheap hero. If they can't comply with your command, they may do as they wish. So that is a change, because cheap heroes can now be voiced to be played or not played by the Gale Force 9 edition of Dune. And the alliance ability is, in an alliance, you may voice an ally's opponent as well. So that is essentially the same. All right, now we've got Emperor Shaddam here. And they have the one advantage: whenever any other player pays spice for a treachery card, they pay to you instead of to the spice bank. And that is the same. The alliance advantage: you may give spice to your allies to purchase treachery cards, to revive tokens, and to make shipments. So very, very clearly, explicitly written out here on the shield here with "you may share your great wealth." On the Gale Force 9 version of it, it sounds like poetic language. This is also further clarified. Their payment for any treachery card, even with your own spice, comes right back to you. So very clearly, if the Emperor has the spice, their ally essentially is getting free treachery cards. As long as they can bid up to whatever the Emperor has, the Emperor just indicates, they just say, yes, here's the 20 spice, I'll take that back, and voila. You have, you've paid me for that with my own spice. So that that goes back to 1979. That has been how the Emperor works. It is not changed in the Gale Force 9 edition. It's just not as explicit, but that is how it is intended to work and how it should be working. All right, we have the Fremen here, Liet Kynes, and their advantages. You may move your token group 2 territories instead of 1, so that's the same. You may bring any or all of your reserves onto any territory within 2 territories of and including the Great Flat, subject to storm and occupancy rules. And you may not move onto Dune in any other way than this. So they don't ship from off-planet. The guild can't ship their forces. According to this, that's the only way they can get onto the planet. If a worm appears in a territory where you have tokens, they are not devoured, but immediately upon conclusion of the Nexus, you may move to any one territory on the board, subject to storm and occupancy rules. And that is the same as well. If no player has won by the end of the last turn, and if you or no one occupies Tabor, Harbina Siege, and neither the Harkonnen Emperor or Trades occupies Tuic Siege, then you win the game. And that would supersede the guild win, so if the Fremen can't pull it off and the guild are in the game, then they would win under those circumstances. Their alliance advantages: your allies are not devoured by worms. Yay for them. And they win if you win at the end of the last turn. So that's essentially the same. No mention of the extra free revival there. We'll see how that shakes out in the optional rules. All right, Spacing Guild, or just Guild as they're called here. You're capable of making one of 3 possible types of shipments each turn. You may ship normally from your off-planet reserves. You may ship any number of tokens from any one territory to any other territory on the board. And that should also say subject to storm and occupancy rules, though it doesn't. Or you may ship any number of tokens from any one territory back to your reserve. So that is essentially the same. You need only pay half the fee when shipping your tokens. And the cost for shipping to your reserves is 1 spice for every 2 tokens. So it's basically stronghold rate to leave the board. And then when any other player ships tokens to Dune from off-planet, they pay the spice to you instead of the spice bank. That is the same. If no other player has been able to win the game by the end of the last turn, then you have prevented control of Dune and automatically win the game. The alliance advantage: allies may use the same types of shipments and at the same cost as you. They win with you if no one else wins. So the guild is not giving their allies free shipment. A lot of people assume that it's free cards with allied with the Emperor, free shipping when you're allied with the guild. The guild have too much overhead. They can't just give you free shipping. They'll give you the discount. And if the guild is going to help pay for it, the guild doesn't pay themselves. They pay the bank. So that is how that is supposed to work and how it does continue to work. And then finally, we have the Harkonnen in there. And it's at the start of the game. You write down the name of all leaders belonging to other players, which you draw. All are in your pay. That's just a poetic way of saying you keep all the traitors. And then you may hold up to 8 treachery cards. At first, if you are dealt 2, you're dealt 2 cards instead of 1, and every time you buy a card, you get an extra card from the deck for free, as long as you have less than 8 total. And then the alliance ability is leaders in your pay may betray your allies' opponents too. So that is essentially the same as well. So the basic advantages, very comparable. In some areas, surprisingly, they're a little more clear in the Avalon Hill edition than they've been in the Gale Force 9 edition. But that's why we make these videos, to hopefully clear those up. Now let's take a look at the back of the player aid, because that is where our additional character advantages, optional rule, are listed. So, for the Emperor, your 5-starred tokens, Elite Sardaukar, have a special fighting capability. They are worth 2 normal tokens in battle and in taking losses against all opponents except the Fremen. Your starred tokens are worth just 1 token against Fremen. They are treated as 1 token in revival. Only 1 star token can be revived per turn. That is the same. And that's the only other thing listed for the Emperor. So one of the things that was added to the Emperor in the Gale Force 9 edition is an alliance ability of being able to pay to revive up to 3 additional forces for their ally. So the Emperor must pay for it, and it's 2 spice per force, which means that the Emperor's ally can essentially revive 6 forces each turn, 3 normally, and then the Emperor can pay for 3 more, which means in a game with the Tleilaxu, if they have raised the revival rate up to 5, that means that that player can revive 5 forces normally, and then the Emperor can pay to revive 3 more for 8 forces. So if you are really in the tanks, literally, then the Emperor makes a great ally for you, especially in a game with the Tleilaxu. So that was a change. And so next one we have is the Guild. You are not required to take your move when it occurs in the turn sequence during the movement round, but may take it at any turn in the sequence that you wish. The rest of the players must take their turns in the proper sequence. You do not have to reveal when you intend to take your turn until the moment you wish to take it. So, worded very differently, but that is essentially the same thing. That is their one advanced game advantage for both editions of the game. So that's the same. Bene Gesserit, it says you have the power to coexist. See optional rules in the instruction folder for further description. So that's going to be a trip to the rule book, which we'll get to in a moment. So let's go on. Fremen have a number of things. 4 advanced advantages in here. First, you select and may look at next turn's storm movement marker. So they didn't have storm cards, but they had little marker tokens, little chits, which was, I think, contractual for Avalon Hill. Have to have chits in there somewhere. So that's essentially the same. They're going to be able to see how far the storm is going to go, and you're using the 1 through 6 method there. Number 2, during a spice blow, all additional worms which appear after the first worm can be placed by you in any territory you wish. Any desert territory, let's not be ridiculous. They cannot devour tokens if not in a desert territory. So the implication here is that, yeah, it's going to just show up in Siege Tabor or the Polar Sink, and that is not really the case. It still only shows up in the deserts. Number 3, if caught in a storm, only half of your tokens are killed. Any fractions are rounded up, and you may bring your reserves into a storm at half loss. So that's the same as well. And number 4, your 3 starred tokens, the Fedaykin, have a special fighting capability. They are worth 2 normal tokens in battle and in taking losses. They are treated as 1 token in revival. Only 1 Fedaykin token can be revived per turn. That's essentially the same here as well. So no mention of 3 extra revival for their ally. So that is an official change made in the Gale Force 9 edition. Also, there's no talk in here about not needing to spend spice to spice style. So that was not originally an official element of the Fremen faction in the Avalon Hill edition of the game. That was specifically added in to make the Fremen more competitive in the Gale Force 9 edition. So kind of a big deal with spice styling being the heart of the advanced rule set. So it does give the Fremen a pretty notable edge in combat. Harkonnen, one advantage here, long paragraph though. Every time you win a battle, you can select randomly 1 leader from the loser, including the leader used in the battle if not killed, but excluding all leaders already used elsewhere that turn. You can immediately turn the leader into the tanks for 2 spice, or use the leader once in a battle, after which you must return them to the original owner. If all of your own leaders have been killed, you must return all captured leaders immediately to their original owners. Killed captured leaders are put in the tanks, from which the original owners can revive them, subject to the normal revival rules. Captured leader is automatically in the pay of the original owner. So that's an interesting distinction there with that last line. A captured leader is automatically in the pay of the original owner. So if I'm Harkonnen and I've captured Stilgar, and I use Stilgar in a battle against a Fremen, it's a traitor. It just happens. But that is not the case in the Gale Force 9 edition. It doesn't say that anywhere in there. And it just is what it is. They would actually have to have the Stilgar card in order to do that, which maybe they would. Maybe in a game with the Tleilaxu, that would be more likely to happen, since you're incentivized to potentially keep one of your own leaders rather than to select a traitor. So interesting, and that question does come up from time to time. Atreides, any turn after losing a total of at least 7 tokens in battles, you may use the Kwisatz Haderach counter. It cannot be used alone in battle, but may add its +2 strength to any 1 leader or cheap hero per turn. If the leader chief hero is killed, the Kwisatz Haderach has no effect in the battle. Kwisatz Haderach can only be killed in a laser gun shield explosion. A leader accompanied by Kwisatz Haderach cannot turn traitor. And if killed, the Kwisatz Haderach must be revived like any other leader. If not killed, it has no effect on Atreides' leader revival. So that is the same as well for Atreides. So that brings us back over to the Bene Gesserit. So buckle in, because it's interesting. So it says in here, because the description of the Bene Gesserit ability to coexist is somewhat detailed, it is presented here rather than the player aid pad. So one, it says, you start one token in any territory of your choice instead of just the polar sink. This is done after the Fremen placement. So that is the same. It's just actually worded a little more clearly here in the Avalon Hill rules, which are 4 pages long. 4 individual pages each side, but 4 pages. Next, beginning with the second turn. So not on the first turn, as it is in the Gale Force 9 edition, but you automatically receive Chom Charity each bidding round, whether you have spice or not. So that is definitely a little bit of a change, but not a huge one. Number 3, whenever any other player ships tokens to Dune from off-planet, you may ship free 1 token from your reserves, spiritual advisors, into the same territory instead of the polar sink. So what's interesting here is that the force that accompanies another player's shipment, whether it goes to the polar sink or goes to where that player has been sent, is called out as a spiritual advisor. And this is the only way a spiritual advisor is called out in these rules for shipment for the Bene Gesserit, which the implication is if you want to send spiritual advisors, that's the only way to send them. So if you've got spiritual advisors already on the board, you can't just ship more advisors. That's the implication. Let's read further because there's more. Number 4, your tokens may coexist peacefully with all other players' tokens in the same territory. While coexisting, your tokens have no effect on the play or the other players whatsoever. Whatsoever, kind of a big word, or at least, impactful. They are treated as if they are not even on the board. That is, they cannot collect spice, cannot be involved in combat, cannot prevent another player's control of a stronghold, cannot receive 3 territory movement bonus. They are still susceptible to storms, worms, and laser gun shield explosions. Now, this is essentially the same. It's meant to be the same advantage, but it gets complicated, and we'll get into that in just a minute. 5, you must announce at the beginning of the movement round, before any movement is started, all territories in which you no longer wish to remain in coexistence. So you're announcing it, and then players have to remember. And the reason for this is because the Avalon Hill edition, the Bene Gesserit Force tokens, are all blue. There's no icons on them. If you flip it over, it's just the same blue. So they didn't have any fighter or advisor status symbol, which admittedly is a pretty handy reference for the Gale Force 9 edition, so you're not having to remember. So now you announced that you were going to remain coexisting in Carthag and Habanya, but not in Tuix, but yes in Tabor, and no in Habanya. Yeah, it's just, it's hard to keep track, especially if you have been accompanying shipments all over the board. So once again, you must announce at the beginning where you no longer wish to remain in coexistence. Anytime you end your move in an occupied territory in which you previously have no tokens, or another player moves their tokens into a territory only you occupy, you must announce whether or not you will coexist there. So that's what's interesting is this first part here is anytime you end your movement in an occupied territory in which you previously have no tokens. So the Atreides are in Arrakeen, and you move your fighters into Arrakeen, you can say, I wish to coexist, and they become advisors. And that is how that would work in the Avalon Hill edition. Faction sheet on the Gale Force 9 edition not 100% clear that that is something that you can do. The intrusion rule is very clear, and that's the second part of this, where another player moves their tokens into a territory only you occupy. So if they're there as fighters, you can then flip them to advisors with the intrusion rule. But the other implication here, though, is that, well, actually, no, it's not that you could go from being an advisor, because if you're occupying it alone, the assumption is that they're fighters, because you're not coexisting with anybody. You're just coexisting with yourself. So anyway, you cannot ship with another player as spiritual advisors into a territory in which you have stated or intend to state when you land that you are not in coexistence that turn. And then those territories in which you choose to be or remain in coexistence must stay in coexistence for the rest of the turn. So that's interesting too. And then it says, your tokens and territories not in coexistence are treated as normal tokens. It is assumed you are in coexistence unless you state otherwise. So your tokens in territories not in coexistence are treated as normal tokens. So the takeaway for me here on this, and the way that we used to play it back in the day, was if I said, yeah, I'm in coexistence on there, then yeah, I'm not going to be able to flip to fighters automatically. And of course, back in the day, we weren't flipping, so it was just a matter of, do they count as advisors, or do they not count as advisors? Now, the faction sheet in Gale Force 9 is whenever your forces are alone in a territory, they are automatically flipped to fighters. And that's more or less what you're driving at here, because anytime that you're by yourself, you're by definition not in coexistence, so you're not an advisor. But it does get yourself in a situation where if you are treating those forces as if they are not on the board for any reason whatsoever, that means that your ally can be there. Why wouldn't your ally be there? It's like your forces are not even on the board. So that is how I've always played it. And I know that the FAQ in 2020 clearly says you can't be in there, although there's another question in the same FAQ that contradicts it. So it does need to be addressed and cleared up officially again. And who can say if that will be the last version or interpretation of how that rule works. But going back to the original texts, the intention was that advisors can be in a territory with their ally. There's nothing in here that says you cannot ship a spiritual advisor with your ally. They're still coming down, and they can coexist in that territory. But then you get the situation where, let's say that you're coexisting with your ally as the Bene Gesserit, and they're in a battle in a stronghold, and both of those forces battling wipe each other out. And now you are alone there with your advisors, and now they count as fighters. So you control that stronghold. And so does it become a kind of underhanded and sneaky way to find a loophole in taking over a stronghold and winning the game as the Bene Gesserit ally? Is that supposed to be the heart and strength of the alliance with the Bene Gesserit, where they can just secretly control all those strongholds that you have sacrificed all of your forces in order to help win? I don't know. I don't know if that was the design intent. Again, a lot of the advanced elements to the game were not introduced to Dune by the designers of Dune, which would be Jack Kittredge, Bill Eberly, and Peter Alaka. They designed a game that became it wasn't even called basic. Those were the rules. And then Avalon Hill introduced some optional rules that you could throw in there that changed things up in a number of ways. And over the years, a lot of people find that the optional rules, they add a lot more flavor and theme to the game, a little more strategic depth to the game. I myself have always preferred the optional rules, which is now the advanced rule set. It did take me a little while to get used to the spy styling, because the basic or original combat rules are much more elegant, very easy to grasp, and they make a lot of sense. It's one of the most elegant and innovative combat mechanisms introduced to board gaming ever. Advanced spy styling, less elegant. Still pretty good and very thematic. And again, once you do get used to it, it's not that big a deal anymore. But for me, the Bene Gesserit, what is become known as Nova flipping, where they're just by default, well, I'm the last woman standing, so I'm flipping to a fighter. So the takeaway that I would have with that is, as part of the choosing when to turn your advisors into fighters is declared before the shipping and movement phase, and which kind of in turn with what the rule set here says as well. And I would have it be where the advisors only automatically flip in territories where they're alone before that phase. So essentially, if they were left over in a stronghold at the end of a battle phase, they remain advisors, but at the start of the next turn, they will flip to fighters. And now they're fighters, but they can always use intrusion to flip back to advisors when anyone else comes into those territories. And the other thing, again, is that the way it's meant to be is if I've been forced to flip into a fighter, I can move that fighter into a territory with another player and automatically flip it to advisors and say I'm declaring to coexist there. Again, it's not super clear on the Gale Force 9 Bene Gesserit faction sheet that is allowable. So part of the reason why some of this was so ambiguous and not consistent, two reasons really. One, of course, was getting the Gale Force 9 edition to print and out to the public as quickly as they could. Gale Force 9 acquired the license to do Dune on the heels of Legendary making the Dune movies, and after a long hiatus of no license. So they wanted to get Dune to print as quickly as possible. This is why they leveraged the existing art that Ilya Baranovsky had put together on Board Game Geek, so that they could get out there very quickly. Updating the rule book was a pretty fast production. They had a lot of people in there trying to streamline it, including longtime Dune players who helped out. It's remarkably better rule book, lots of great illustrations. It's not without a couple of mistakes, but the Bene Gesserit situation is exacerbated by the fact that they do have the tokens with the two sides. So you've got the fighter side and the advisor side, which is a great innovation. It is very handy to be able to, at a glance, go, you're an advisor there, you're an advisor here. Here, you are not advising. You're fighters. You're ready to fight. And then knowing when other forces come into play, that the Bene Gesserit have to make that decision immediately. It's much more obvious. But you can't just take the old language and then insert it into the new one untouched, because the old language has no reference to the flipping your tokens over. So it got a little bit messy. It was a valiant effort. So not to criticize, but there's some holes in it, and some areas where the wording could have been a little bit tighter. That sheet, they're using both sides of it, so they filled it up. There was a lot of stuff on there. There wasn't room for a lot of examples, and that's why your FAQ entries, the section on the Bene Gesserit, is the longest. This is where you have the most nuance added to the game, where you're trying to sort out, well, what about this situation? Or what about happens here? And as each new faction is added to the game and new treachery cards are added, there's the potential for more nuance. And the designers try to get out ahead of it as much as possible. But there's always going to be issues. And not everybody who's playing Dune, one, is even aware of an FAQ or that there are answers out there. But even then, again, there are some contradictions in the FAQ. There are technically two FAQs out there. There was the original one that came out very soon after. Not very long, not very detailed. There's some Q&A at the back of the rule book. And again, if you try to get answers on Reddit or Board Game Geek or Discord, you'll get 5 people with 6 opinions. So it's very it's very confusing. And I think eventually at some point, a new edition of Dune will eventually come out. Who knows if it's even in my lifetime. But it's something that needs to be at the top of the list to clear up, hopefully once and for all. And even a new FAQ will hopefully make things better. But again, not everybody knows about an FAQ or refer to it. And again, if there's another one, if there's a 2023 or whatever edition of the FAQ, it's hard to make the 2021 vanish. Some people have downloaded it or printed it out or what have you. So it's going to be an ugly situation. There's no way around that. But also at the end of the day, I mean, Dune out of the box is a game that has 2 versions. So there's already more than one way to play Dune. I think even with other people in different groups, there's going to be more and more. Other people homebrew or house rule certain things. They haven't been able to wrap their heads around advanced combat, so they've come up with all sorts of different alternatives. But I thought it would be interesting at least to kind of go back to the original texts and look at what the advantages were, how they were worded, what they did, and maybe that will inform your house rules or how you choose to play it. Know that when I play Dune, I clear up and I clarify right away that the advisors can coexist with their allies. But I would love to have an official statement or some kind of ruling come down on the quote-unquote Nova flipping. It does seem, even though the Dune universe is rampant with treachery and sinister moves and underhanded developments, that the Bene Gesserit just default taking over a stronghold after their ally has wiped themselves out by trying to wipe out somebody else. That rubs me the wrong way. So I would say, yeah, you got to work a little bit harder at it, Bene Gesserit, than just being there and not doing anything. So that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the rules. Was there anything in there that surprised you? Have you been playing things the old way, the right way, the quote-unquote wrong way? What are your thoughts? What would you like to see? Where do you fall on the many faceted Bene Gesserit controversies and nuances? Let me know your thoughts on that. We're never going to get consensus, but I'm always interested in hearing what everyone has to say, and then look for trends or look for what I think most people would like to see in that, and do what I can to move things in that direction one day from now. That's it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.